I hope that you're well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today we'll be doing our grade 3 English lesson on irregular past tense. And remember, we did say that the lessons that we will be doing is there's like a long list of lessons on irregular past tense. So, which means that literally the whole of this week we will be doing irregular past tense. So before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with your username as well as your password, and then we're going to choose the subject of language arts, grade 3, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of irregular past tense. All right, so we've been doing irregular past tense, or more like we started yesterday, and we see that there is quite let's say, a list that we need to do. So we're still going to do irregular past tense today, and then we're also still going to do it either the end of the week or maybe sometime in next week, right? So our chapter is irregular past tense. Our subject is English language arts, grade 3, and the lessons that we are focusing on is to form and use irregular past tense. And there's basically like 3 sets. So 3 sets today and then 2 more sets next time. Right? So that is going to be our lessons for today. All right, so just to recap again over irregular past tense, right? Remember we did irregular past tense. So now we're going to do it again and we're going to basically recap over irregular past tense and what they are. So when it comes to irregular past tense, right? Before we go to irregular, with regular past tense, most of the verbs are regular in the past tense, right? And that means that you follow a specific rule, like you add ed or you add d. That is when the verb is regular, right? So if it's regular, then you add either d or you add ed to your verb to show it's in the past, right? But if it is irregular, right? So some of our verbs are irregular in the past tense. And once it's irregular in the past tense, then that means that you do not have to follow a rule. Instead, you're just going to have to remember the past tense form of that specific word. So if, for example, Mia left the party early. So Mia left the party early. So left is our irregular past tense. So irregular past tense is left, and the present tense of left is to leave. So we leave in the present tense, but in the past tense, we have left. Right? So you also remember the examples that we made of the different forms of irregular past tense. So today's lesson is where we are going to form and use the different irregular past tense, right? All right, and when we form and use irregular past tense, and it means that we are basically going to come up with more irregular past tense verbs, and then we are going to form sentences using that irregular past tense, right? And here is but a few examples once again of irregular past tense, right? For example, the base form, it's like the present tense form, right? And then the simple past tense is the irregular past tense of that specific word. And an example is, for example, sell. It's like I sell something. And then in the past, I sold something. So I sell something now, but in the past, I sold something. Correct? So if you were to form a sentence using the words both sell and sold, then how would you form a sentence? So if we, for example, use the sentence sell, right? Or let's say, let's just go to the sentence sold. Then you can maybe say, I sold my PS4 so that I could get a PS5, right? So that is basically how we use or form a sentence using the word sold. So meaning that you sold, this person sold his or her PS4 so they could get a PS5. All right. So that is but one example of how we can form and basically use that sentence, right? If we, for example, so there is more irregular past tense, right? So we have, for example, send and sent, sing and sang. They sit when, for example, we sleep now, but yesterday or earlier on I slept. Speak, right? Spoke. I spoke to Jake yesterday. Stand up, right? Stood up or stood. Sweep, sweep the room. Swim, I swam at I swam. Take, I took. To teach something, you taught. To tear something, you tore the pants. You tell a lie, you told a lie, right? I think that I want chocolates. Oh, I thought I wanted chocolates, right? And then we have understand, throw something, throw a ball, you threw a ball. You understand something now, you understand the work. Yesterday, I understood irregular verbs, right? I wake up to the smell of pancakes. I woke up to the smell of bacon and eggs. That was a PS5. Where I wore the same jeans yesterday to win, and you won something. Write something, you wrote a letter, right? So those are but a few irregular verbs or irregular past tense verbs, right? With that is the base form, which is the present tense form, as well as the simple past tense form of the irregular past tense verb. Exactly. So where and wore. And if we make a sentence using one of those sentences, I use the sentence understand and understood. Yes, that is correct. Sleep and slept. Wear and wore. So if I use a sentence using the word understood, which is in the past tense, it's the past tense of I understand something. Then I can say, I understood the work. So I understood the work yesterday, right? Because yesterday, most of you say that you understood the irregular past tense, right? All right, if we use another one, which is tore. Tear is to tear up something, and then the past tense form of that is tore. So you can say, I tore my pants while jumping the fence. So I tore my pants while jumping the fence. And if we look at all three of these irregular past tense, in the first one it says, I sold my PS4 so that I could get a PS5. So our irregular past tense is sold. I understood the work yesterday, right? So irregular past tense over here is understood. I tore my pants while jumping the fence. So tore, right? And then one more we can maybe say is I swam in the hot pool. Right? So I swam in the hot pool. So swam is our irregular past tense. Right? So these are once again but a few examples of the irregular past tense verbs, right? On this the picture, we have the present tense forms, which is the base form, as well as the simple past tense form, right, of the verb. And remember, we said with irregular past tense forms, right? You with irregular past tense forms, there's no rules that you need to follow. You're just gonna have to know the past tense form of that specific word, right? Because there's no rules that you need to follow. The word kind of changes, right? So now we're going to form and use irregular past tense. And we said that some of the verbs are irregular in the past tense, and that means that you do not follow any rules. Instead, you must just remember the past tense form of the verb. All right. I made an example of lift and leave. Okay, so now if we look at over here, it says the girl sick for 3 days. The girl sick for 3 days. Do we say the girl feels sick for 3 days? Or do we say the girl felt sick for 3 days? Do we say the girl feels sick for 3 days? Or do we say the girl felt sick for 3 days? What is the correct answer or the correct tense? The girl feels sick for 3 days or the girl felt sick for 3 days? All right, and since it's the irregular past tense form, we can say that the girl felt sick for 3 days. Right? So felt is the irregular past tense of feel. Right? I feel sick today. Yesterday, I felt sick. I was sick for 3 days. So felt is correct. Clayton is hat in the room. Do we say Clayton? Do we say Clayton lose or Clayton lost his hat in the room? Clayton lose or Clayton lost his hat in his room? We either need to choose between lose being the base form or lost being the past tense form. So do we say Clayton lose his hat in his room or Clayton lost his hat in his room? All right. And if we choose the irregular past tense verb, we're going to say that Clayton lost his hat in his room because lost is the past tense verb of lose. Mr. Kirby, do we say sell bread at the bake sale? Or Mr. Kirby sold bread at the cake sale? Mr. Kirby sell bread at the cake sale? At the bread sale, sorry. Or Mr. Kirby sold bread at the bake sale? Mr. Kirby sell or sold? Remember, we are doing in the past tense. In the past tense. So in the past tense, then we will say Mr. Kirby sold bread at the bake sale. Yes, well done. Sold is correct. All right, so now we're going on to our test where we are going to form and use irregular past tense. Set 1. So we need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. Do we say they built or they build a railroad across the country? So they built or build a railroad across the country. So we need to choose the correct past tense verb. They built a railroad across the country or they build a railroad across the country. You need to show the past tense verb. And if we choose the correct past tense verb, we can say they built a railroad across the country. And built is correct. So well done. Built is correct. Gavin slept or Gavin sleep through the loud storm. So Gavin slept or Gavin sleep through the loud storm. Do we say Gavin slept in the past tense or Gavin sleep, which is now through the loud storm? So Gavin slept through the loud storm or Gavin sleep through the loud storm. All right. And if we look at the past tense verb of that word, then we can say Gavin slipped. Slipped is the past tense of sleep. So Gavin slipped through the loud storm. So well done, everybody. I bent back the top of the box, or I bend back the top of the box. I bent back the top of the box, or I bend back the top of the box. We need to choose the irregular past tense verb. All right. And if we use the correct one, we say, I bent back the top of the box. And bent is correct, so well done, bent, right? Do we say she left her drink on the table, or do we say she leave her drink at the table? We need to choose the irregular past tense. She left a drink at the table, or she leave her drink at the table. So do we say she left a drink at the table, or she leave her drink at the table? And if we choose the correct irregular past tense verb, we're going to say that she left her drink at the table. So well done. All right, so that is to form and use irregular past tense set 1. Now we're going to choose form and use irregular past tense set 2. And remember we said when it comes to past tense or irregular past tense, right? Then there's no rules that you're going to have to follow. Instead, you must just remember the past tense form of the specific verb. All right. Here it says we need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. The show, do we say the show begin before we got there? Or the show began before we got there? So do we say the show begin before we got there, or the show began before we got there? Begin or began? The irregular past tense. All right. And if we choose the correct one, we can say that the show began before we got there. So it began before we got there. All right. So the same with begin and began, right? I began to dance to a song I like, right? So the same with began in the previous, we can also say that I began to dance to a song I like. So began without the I, right? So do we say you grow so much over the summer? Or do we say you grew so much over the summer? So do we say you grow so much over the summer? Or do we say you grew so much over the summer? So do we say you grow so much over the summer? Or you grew so much over the summer? All right. And then we can say you grew so much over the summer. And grew is correct. So well done. Now we're going to our test. All right. So we need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. So we need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. The door just, do we say the door just blew over open or the door just blow open? So the door just blew open or the door just blow open? All right, so we can say the door blew or just blew open. And blew being our past tense verb. The show began before we got there or the show begin before we got there? All right. So now we say the show began before we got there, or the show begin before we got there. So the show began before we got there, or the show begin before we got there. All right. So we can say the show began because it is the irregular past tense. It began before we got there, and that is correct. Sarah threw away her old mail, or she threw away her old mail. So Sarah threw away her old mail, or throw away. And if we choose the correct one, we will say Sarah threw away her old mail because threw is the past tense of throw. And then Minnie, do we say Minnie ride? Mimi ride the bus into town, or Minnie rode the bus into town. All right. So we can say Minnie rode the bus into town. And road is correct. All right. So now if we look at the set three, so far we did set one and two of forming the irregular past tense. Now we're going to set three. It says during the parade, do we say people ring bells or people rang bells? And then we can say during the parade, people rang the bells because it's in the past tense. And rang is the past tense of ring. And then Anthony was excited when do we say when he win the board game? Or he was excited when he won the board game? So we say and Anthony was excited when he win the board game, or Anthony was excited when he won the board game. All right, so we say that Anthony was excited when he won the board game. All right, so that is now the end of our lesson on forming irregular past tense verbs. We did set 1, set 2, as well as set 3, right? And still, irregular past tense is basically the past of either the present tense or the base word, right? And we said when it comes to irregular past tense verb, then there's no rule that you must follow. You are just going to have to remember the irregular past tense form of that specific word. All right, so this is the end of our lesson, grade 3. Thank you very much for joining the class. Until next time, goodbye.